So happy to present to you my friend, an educator, a formator, a first class Catholic, son of the Catholic Church. Please welcome Mr. Ferold Rutch Regencia.
Thank you very much, man. Can you hear me? Can you all hear me? Okay, so let me begin by sharing my screen. Okay, so here we go. Yan, okay. Thank you again very much, Mr. Rentoy. Yeah, he's my best friend, and he invited me to give a talk on how to tap students' emotions in teaching religion. So good afternoon, my dear fellow teachers. And let me first share with you my experience in teaching religion. So I actually taught religion at RF School in Alabang, Southridge School. And I must admit that during those times that I taught religion, I never actually thought of tapping the students' emotions. In fact, I remember puro catechism points, no? Memorize this, memorize that. And there's nothing wrong with that. No, it's just that I realized now, years later, that I could have, no, done something more than just letting the students memorize catechism points. Because the students naman would go back to Southridge and tell us, sir, we learned a lot. The things that we memorized were good because we still remember them, although not in its entirety. At least kahit paano naalala nila. Now that um, we thought, no, that I thought that we could actually do more than the catechism points. Today, let's explore on this idea of tapping the students' emotions in teaching religion. My dear fellow teachers, I'm sure that many of us would have had the experience of students approaching us and asking us or telling us, Mom, sir, sister, what are emotions? And more often than not, our reply would be, oh, emotions would include, the experience of happiness, joy, sadness, and so forth and so on. Without realizing that what we are giving our students are actually examples of emotions. That is why today I would like to focus first on the emotions, what they are, the definition, okay, and its origin, so that when the students approach us, when we teach them, when we tap their emotions, we know how to answer them when they ask us what emotions are and not just give examples. So I hope that is okay with everyone so that we will become experts, quote unquote, not just in tapping the students' emotions, but also knowing what emotions are. And then later on, we will proceed in more or less giving you suggestions as to how we can actually teach religion in this aspect. Okay, so let me now proceed. Let me first mention to you the purpose for emotions. No, if we talk about God's purpose for emotions, God gave human emotions to prompt us to do something. Later on, we will talk about emotions in the area of philosophy, and we realize that we have emotions because we have bodies similar to that of animals. And since God says that of the commandments hang upon loving and loving others, loving God and loving others, emotions help us live in healthy relationships and stay connected to God and others. In other words, God gave us the commandments, not just the commandments, but in order for us to actually practice the commandments, we ought to have the emotions. That is why we have emotions so that we will be able to practice the commandments. I hope you saw the connection. Kaya importante sa atin na ma-realize natin ano ba yung emotions so that we know how to deal with not just with our students but also with our lessons when it comes to religion. Very important aspect. That is why I started with this, the purpose of our emotions, which is the purpose from God. Now, let me go into this area. What about the Bible? So we learned about what God's purpose is with regard to emotions. What about the Bible? What does the Bible say about being emotionally strong? This is also very important because many of the passages in the Bible would actually work and discuss on being emotionally strong. Okay. If you look at the upper left statement, it says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." This statement actually gives us the assurance that God will always be with us. So if God is with us, then we have to have that strong and courageous emotion. Now, on the lower right statement, "Surely God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation." So if you notice, this is a response to the statement on the upper left corner of the slide. So if we are given the assurance, then we have to also give that assurance to God. And because we know that God is with us, then our emotions have to actually say yes to what was given to us in terms of the assurance. Again, why am I stating this? Because as religion teachers, we have to be assured and we have to assure God. Now we have that strong emotions and that we know that God is with us, then we can teach religion with conviction. That is why even as teachers must have that conviction and emotion. So let us not be afraid. You know, we often encounter that statement. In fact, later on, I will also mention that statement of "be not afraid," because it has been stated in the Bible. It has been stated in the encounters with guardian angels, with God Himself. And so, as religion teachers, we have to have that assurance, strong conviction that we teach religion with the proper emotions because God is with us. Allow me to proceed. So we heard about God's purpose. We heard about what the Bible tells us about emotions. In fact, even the book of St. James in chapter 1, verses 19 to 20, in verse 19, "Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger." Verse 20, "For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God." Again, we have that kind of assurance. So with all of these things that I mentioned to you as part of my introduction, it's actually giving us that faith and courage for us teachers to teach religion with emotions so that we it starts from us. So it starts from us and we will be able to tap the emotions of our students later on. So that's the beginning. It starts from us. Now, let me now proceed to what I have mentioned to you a while ago. Sabi ko kanina, I hope everyone understands Tagalog here. If there's anyone who does not speak Tagalog or Filipino, please just mention it to me so that I have to speak straight English. I mentioned a while ago that I will focus on the emotions because more often than not, we are actually asked by our students, but then we give them examples, but we actually do not give them the definition or meaning of emotions. I would like to begin by talking about emotions in its philosophical aspect so that kahit papano matutunan natin ang philosophy, emotions in terms of philosophy. Later on, we will realize na, uy, kahit pala hindi ako nagtuturo ng philosophy, I could actually explain to my students emotions in the philosophical aspect. Okay, let me now proceed. So what emotions are in terms of philosophy? I'd like to begin by talking about knowledge because we know that everything starts with our senses. And whatever we see, we touch, we feel, and so forth and so on, actually proceeds or it is being processed in our mind. And so therefore, we get to know. Okay. But then we realize that, oh, there are two kinds of knowledge pala. The first one is, before I go into that, if you look at this picture, you see here a picture of a flower. But if I ask you, what is that you see right now? Some of you might say, oh, I see red. Others would say, I see a flower. The others would actually identify the flower as a rose. Okay. So that is how we process things. From the sensation, it enters our mind, we process, and we get to identify. That is why, for those of you who said Yes, it's a red that I see. It's what we call the sense knowledge, because that's what you see. That is red. That's what you sensed. But then for those of you who said, oh, that is a rose, that is what we call the intellectual knowledge, because you have identified that red color into a flower, which is a rose. So therefore, we have actually realized that there are two kinds of facts or truth um, that we have actually identified, and these two facts are referred to the so-called sense knowledge and what we call the intellectual knowledge. Now, from the knowledge, it proceeds to what we call as appetite. Okay, now later on you'll realize na, oh, bakit kailangan pa ng knowledge and appetite? Okay, before we proceed into that, we also find out that there are actually two kinds of appetite. Now, if knowledge tends towards the truth, the appetites tend towards the goods. Now, always remember that we cannot desire what we do not know. That's why it really has to begin with knowledge before we get to proceed to the so-called appetites. Now, what are the two kinds of appetites? Okay, we find out that if there's a sense knowledge, there is also a so-called sense appetite. The sense appetite would tend towards the sensible goods. For example, we love to eat. So when we tend towards the food, then that's your sense appetite. On the other hand, there is what we call the intellectual appetite, which tends towards what we see as good. So therefore, for example, if a student sees that to graduate is good, that is an intellectual appetite because they tend towards that specific good. So what is the connection? Where do the emotions come in? Emotions come in here because emotions are movements, okay, of these appetites toward or away from known goods. So this is where the emotions enter. So from the knowledge to the appetites and the movements towards those appetites will be what we call as emotion. This is what we talk about in terms of the philosophical aspect. In fact, if we talk about goods that can cause pleasure, okay, my apologies for using beer as an example. So an appetite that can cause pleasure, example is beer. Okay, there is what we call a general, okay, appetite that can cause pleasure, which we like in terms of our emotion or dislike. Have you ever wondered bakit ang Facebook makes good use of those icons na smile, angry, like, heart, etc.? Those are actually, those signify the emotion that we want to show in what was posted, okay, in Facebook. Okay, so yun yung general, di ba? Before nga wala pa yung heart, wala pa yung embrace, rather yung hug, wala pa yung, I'm not sure if there was angry before, parang like and heart pa lang yata before. That's why there are some people who don't know what to put pagka nagkasakit ako. Like, kasi wala nang iba. And then magagalit, no? yung tao, bakit mo ni-like? Nagkasakit na nga ako. Eh, but what do I put? No? Wala na akong ibang ilagay. That's why Facebook realized that they have to put other icons there which show your emotion. Okay? Now, let's proceed. So that's the general. Now, what about approaching? Approaching. So if I go to a bar where I buy drinks, but I don't like beer, like in my case, I don't actually drink beer. So that will be aversion. And then the desire is, of course, to buy beer. And the third one is the acquired, meaning you already acquired the beer, you drank, and then you feel happy. But for those who like beer and don't actually get to buy one, they feel sadness. So in philosophy, they actually go as positive and negative. So you have the like and dislike, desire, aversion, happiness, and sadness. But my point is, again, the emotions enter into the picture because they move towards the appetite, something that is good for us or seemingly good or something that we actually like. On the other hand, there is another type of good, which we actually call the difficult goods. Okay, these are an example is the physical fitness. Okay, mahirap talaga yan. I must admit, even in my case now, when we had the pandemic, I actually had it found it really difficult to do physical fitness. Now, first, so if it's possible, meaning I can actually do it, I can actually do physical fitness, then there's hope. Okay. Now, what if we're on the second stage? Naku, kakayanin ko ba? Okay, mukhang hindi ko kaya. Okay? And then the last one, will I be able to acquire it? And if I'm able to acquire it, there's joy. And if I'm not able to acquire it, there's anger on the part of the person. I hope it is clear for us to see that emotions, okay, start with the knowledge, because we cannot desire what we do not know. We have to know first, and once we get to know it, we get to um, exhibit the emotions. So that's how it starts. So that is in the philosophical aspect. But let me remind everyone, okay, are emotions good or bad? Okay, I'm sure that sorry, not I'm sure. I have to remove that statement. I will just answer it directly. Are emotions good or bad? The answer to that is neither. Okay, it's neither good or bad. But like food, too much or too little of it is also bad. Like money, too much or too little of it is also bad. And we have to be, if we have to be too hopeful or too courageous, everything that is of the extreme is also bad. So we have to realize that when we talk about emotions, of course, we have to exhibit emotions, but if they go to the extremes, then we have to do something about it, because it sends us a red flag. It's going to be a warning for all of us. And we have to have that realization that we have emotions because we have bodies like the animals, like what I mentioned a while ago. But the difference is that we are rational animals. So if we are rational animals, we have to remember this. And this is very important. Emotions have to be governed by our reason. We have to be reminded of this. Even our students, we have to be reminded of this, because sometimes their emotions, okay, govern their reason. So the statement goes this way. A man cannot govern a nation if he cannot govern a city, but he cannot govern a city if he cannot govern a family, but he cannot govern a family unless he can govern himself. And he cannot govern himself unless his passions, which refer to emotions, are subject to reason. So that is why, right from the start, we teachers will have to know this. We have to have control of our emotions. We cannot teach our students by shouting inside the classroom. Araw-araw tayong sumisigaw. Our emotions take the best of us. Hindi pwede. It has to be the other way around. We have to govern our emotion. Because if we cannot govern our passions or emotions, then maybe teaching is not for us. Or because you attended seminars like this, then you will be able to control your emotions and manage them. And so teaching is actually for you, dear teachers. So let me now proceed. So we are able to see the philosophical aspect of emotions. Now, let me proceed to the next part. What about the psychological part? Okay, you see there the word emotional intelligence. You see in the 80s, I think that was the first time that I was introduced to the EQ. Nasa commercials na siya lumalabas, no? EQ, EQ. And in fact, there are statements that says it's better, EQ is better than IQ. Okay? So how did this come to be? Bakit nagkaroon ng emotional intelligence? Paano nagsimula? Okay, let me introduce to you three personalities, very important personalities. We have John Mayer, not the singer. Okay, he's a psychologist, Peter Salovey, and Daniel Goleman. Okay, these are the three important personalities in psychology who actually started emotional intelligence and social intelligence. John Mayer and Peter Salovey were the ones who started and studied and introduced emotional intelligence. In fact, they coined emotional intelligence, while Daniel Goleman was the one who actually popularized it. Okay, so is it important? Do we need to really know that there is, bakit intelligence ang tawag natin when they are supposed to be emotions? No, the reason why they called it intelligence is because of this reason. No? It involves the ability to process emotional information accurately and efficiently. So imagine that, no? So na process na natin ang emotional information. Now, since we're able to process emotional information, they consider it as emotional intelligence. Now, what has social intelligence got to do with it? Because according to them, if people get to maintain and manage emotional intelligence, then they are able to actually transfer it to other people. So if you understand your own emotions, maintindihan nyo rin yung emotions ng ibang tao. Kaya pinapasa nyo sa ibang tao. That's why it becomes social intelligence. Why? Because you also get to know the emotions of other people and you get to manage the emotions of other people. Kaya nagiging social intelligence siya. And in the process, nagkakaroon kayo ng relationships. Okay? Um, I think the best example that I can give you is that if you have students who are new, okay, you cannot just have immediately a best friend. No, the new student cannot just have a best friend right away after the first day. Of course, maybe the little kids would go home and say, "Mom, Dad, I have a new best friend. His name is Jose." Okay, so of course, best friend na kaagad sa tingin niya. Pero without realizing that actually, nagsisimula pa lang yung kanilang exchange. Okay? Uh, I am reminded of the one of my favorite books of all time, The Little Prince. If you recall the part in The Little Prince wherein the prince actually meets the fox, and then he talks to the fox and says, "May you be my friend?" And then the fox go, "Oh, no, 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 no. We cannot be friends. You cannot be friends with me." And then the little prince was like, "What? Why not? Hey, you look like a cute little creature or something like that." And the little fox says, "Well, because I'm wild. You have to, you have, if you really want me to be your friend, you have to tame me." Okay, the little prince, sige, I will do that. But what does it take for me to tame you? And the fox simply says, "Let's meet each other every day, same time, same place, but for each time we see each other, we have to come closer." In other words, from one end to one end, the next day they have to move closer, and then they are very close to each other and they get to talk. That is actually the perfect example I can give you with regard to emotional intelligence and social intelligence. Bago kayo magkaroon ng best friends, you have to first have that so-called EQ, emotional intelligence or emotional exchange is what I say. And then later on, you have the social intelligence. Okay? Interesting, no? Kasi parang nagkaroon na ng intelligence pero they are supposed to be emotions. They are not from the brain. But then that's how, again, psychology talks about emotions. Talks about emotions. Okay, let me now proceed. Now, let me introduce to you this person named Paul Ekman. Okay. Now, Paul Ekman was the one who pioneered the study of emotions. Remember, kanina we talked about emotional intelligence, but it was Paul Ekman who actually studied emotions and their relationship to facial expressions. Dito na lumalabas yung facial expressions na nakikita natin sa Facebook. Okay? But Paul Ekman just started with the 7 basic emotions, which are fear, anger, surprise, contempt, sadness, joy, and disgust. In fact, nagkaroon pa nga ng argument because some psychologists say that contempt is actually a mixture of anger and disgust. Pero for me, well, it doesn't matter. Why? Because the more important thing for me is that he was able to start coming up with terms that we can use to associate our emotions. Yan. Now, we have another personality, but before we go into that, I actually place the definition of emotions below. Okay, emotions in psychology, refer to the bodily chemical reactions to or interpretations, okay, that would actually trigger us. Okay, so take note, okay, may pagkakaiba ba sa philosophical aspect from the psychological aspect in terms of emotions? Kasi sinabi na sa psychology, bodily chemical reactions eh. But then if you try to look at it, okay, yung term that says the trigger us, okay, it's actually the same as what the philosophy tells us. Remember, the emotions actually are movements towards the appetites. Okay, so bodily chemical reactions but actually trigger us. So it actually is a movement towards a specific appetite. So pareho lang sila ng definition. May pagkakaiba lang, may pagkakaiba lang in using the terms or the statements, pero actually pareho lang sila. Kaya lang, we have to really show the differences between the two so that we realize na even if psychology sees it this way, philosophy sees it that way, emotions are emotions. Okay? So even if in philosophy we learned kanina that we have like or dislike, okay? Hope versus despair, ganun din naman. Okay, meron pa rin tayong fear, sadness, anger, joy. In fact, pagdating kay Robert Plutchik, you see his name there, he actually agreed with Ekman's biologically driven perspective, but he extended it and he developed his own model called the wheel of emotions. Para ma-realize natin na ang emotions natin are not just, are actually, wait, sorry, oh shucks. Okay, my apologies. Okay, let me try to go back. Okay. Ganado pa naman sana tayo. Excited na tayo. Okay, let me now continue. Okay, sabi nga ni Mr. Antoy sa akin before, na when we are doing something good, the devil tries to stop us from doing so. So let me just try to go back. Okay, so here is now the wheel of emotions according to Robert Plutchik. What does this tell us? This actually tells us that emotions are actually complex. Okay, we see simple emotions like joy, trust, anticipation, anger, disgust, sadness, surprise. But what Robert Plutchik did was he actually extended it. So he said, actually meron siyang lighter version ng emotion. Kung meron tayong sadness, the lighter version would be being pensive. And the stronger version would be grief. So dun niya pinakita na complex ang emotions natin, which is true. I think all of us would agree that emotions are actually complex. Okay? But then of course, we don't have to go into the complexity of it kung kaya naman nating maagapan yung situation kung saan, halimbawa, our students would be sad. And then our student is sad because maybe maybe he lost his parents, she lost her parents, and it would lead to grief. Okay, but maybe the grief we will not proceed to grief if we're able to assist the person. I will talk to you something about in relation to that later on when we teach a specific topic or subject matter in religion. Pero this is a realization that our students may have complex emotions. During my time, when I was a student way back 5 years ago, when I was a student way back, 30 years ago, I guess, high school, or maybe even more. Okay, when my teacher sees a student crying, di ba ang normal reaction ng teacher at that time would be, arte mo. Maarte lang yan. Even the classmates, di ba? Arte lang yan, sir. Arte lang yan, ma'am. Without realizing that there is something valid that this person actually is showing this type of emotion. Now that we are in the 21st century, sana, no, sana ma-realize natin na emotions are complex and that we can do something about it as teachers. And sana wag natin hayaan yung mga estudyante natin who would actually manifest a specific emotion, and we don't just tell them na kaya mo yan, maarte ka lang, okay? Iiyak-iyak ka dyan. Anong meron? Anong problema? No? Instead of doing that, maybe let's try to find out. Because psychology tells us, philosophy tells us, that emotions are actually triggered by something. Okay? So, sana, teachers, okay, before we get to tap the emotions of our students, let's first discover, okay, the importance of the emotions and the complexity of the emotions without really going to the nitty-gritty of things. Just by knowing this, alam na natin na okay, complex pala ang emotions. So when we teach religion, let's focus on specific emotions. And ang emotions pala, hindi lang yung simple, no? Meron, in fact, anticipation is a type of emotion. Trust is a type of emotion which we clearly see in the Bible, no? When Moses lost his trust in God, when he didn't follow God and obeyed God and tapping the rock, no? That's why he was actually punished by God. Okay? So yung mga ganong emotions which we never really touched on before. Maybe. Okay? Admiration is an emotion. Terror is an emotion. If you're a terror teacher, I hope you realize na, hey, maybe dahan-dahan lang. Maybe doon lang muna tayo sa fear. Huwag muna tayo doon sa terror. So upon realizing these emotions based on the based on philosophy and psychology, what about the Catechism of the Catholic Church? Ano ba ang sinasabi ng Catechism of the Catholic Church when it comes to emotions? But before we go into that, baka kasi masyadong heavy yung ating pinag-uusapan, I'd like to go into something light muna. Okay? Pahinga muna tayo kasi nag-philosophy na tayo, nag-psychology na tayo, tapos Catechism of the Catholic Church pa. Baka sabihin nyo na kay Mr. Antoy, anong nangyari? Bakit parang philosophical class and psychological class na itong pinasok, psychology class na itong pinasok namin? Okay, let me just go into something light. Lighter mood muna tayo. So a week ago, we had this Para Future Leaders Summit. Okay, the students that you see there are actually student leaders from the different para schools. So we have from Alabang, Southridge, Antipolo, Northfield, Iloilo, Westbridge, Cebu, Springdale, and Cagayan de Oro, Roseville. And I'm proud to say that this was organized by Mr. Manrentoy himself and Mr. Luden Salamat. Okay. So why did I mention this? Emotions naman yung topic natin. Just would like to share with you a short story. So this actually happened, I think, on the third to the last night, second to the last night, something, when we were in Kabuya, when some students approached me and they said, "Sir, can you tell us ghost stories?" Naku, ayan na. And I said, of course, yes, because I love Mr. Antoy and I love sharing ghost stories. But then when you ask yourself this question, di ba, bakit gustong-gusto ng mga tao ng mga ghost stories? Pero natatakot naman tayo. Okay? Di ba, yung mga horror movies, laging patok na patok yan, no? Kaya kailangan pagka may Metro Manila Film Festival, hindi mawawala yung mga horror movies. But then, bakit? Ano yan? Gusto ba nating matakot? Okay, I guess it's a natural way wherein people would love to listen to ghost stories because of the emotions that is attracted to us. Medyo kasi bihira tayo. Bihira natin ma-experience yung kind of horror, okay, that we hear in our regular life. Okay, unless you live in a haunted house. Kaya siguro gusto natin. So but what I did was when I told the stories to the students, of course, takot sila, kinilabutan sila. Now you get to see the emotions of the students. But then I didn't want to stop there kasi if I did that, baka magkaroon ng nightmares yung mga bata later on. Worse, pag nagkaroon ng trauma. So I decided to end my story with a horror comedy. So, to cut the long story short, syempre, nagtawanan sila at the end. Then someone asked me this question. Sabi niya, sir, why did you end with a horror comedy? And then I said, I had to. So that when you sleep tonight, you sleep happy. Okay? Nakatawa kayo, nakasmile kayo. Hindi yung takot na takot kayo, kailangan ko ng kasama, pupunta sa CR, kailangan may kasama ko matulog, stuff like that. So very important for us to realize that students, no? Students really like to have these kinds of emotions. Okay, they love to hear your stories, di ba? Mom, sir, okay, paano kayo nagkakilala ng wife nyo or husband ninyo, ma'am? Okay, di ba gustong-gusto nila yung ganong stories? That is actually a best example for us to realize na, hey, our students actually like their emotions to be tapped. Okay? So that's why I paused for a while para medyo light muna, and of course to promote na meron tayong Future Leaders Summit, because I know Mr. Rentoy's vision is someday hindi lang PAREF kundi the whole Philippines. So I'm just starting to promote this now, but Mr. Rentoy's vision is not just PAREF, but to invite later on all the student leaders from the different regions of the whole country. And I pray now we will be able to reach that goal. So let me now proceed. So now, ito na, Catechism of the Catholic Church. Taka. Philosophy, psychology, now Catechism of the Catholic Church. Question is, may pagkakaiba ba? Okay. Look at what the Catechism of the Catholic Church tells us. It sees that emotions as natural tendencies, which can lead us to prudence and moral virtue. Again, lead us to something. Pareho lang, no? It's a tendency naman ang tawag nila, natural tendency. In fact, it is discussed in Catechism of the Catholic Church thoroughly, even if they are short pages lang from 1763 to 1765. The sections, okay, it is discussed there. Please try to read this portion of the Catechism of the Catholic Church because they are important. And in fact, some would say it is life-changing. Okay, so pareho pa rin ang kanilang view in terms of emotions. Catechism says the passions, see, they also term it as passions, which I mentioned kanina. Okay, so passions, emotions, okay, are natural components of the human psyche. Okay, what does it mean? It means that they are natural components of the conscious, preconscious, unconscious, subconscious mind. Okay, so pare-pareho lang sinasabi, iba-iba lang yung statement, pero emotions are actually the same in terms of definition. So when our students actually ask us, Mom, Sir, ano ba yung emotions? Sabihin nyo lang sa kanila, read section number, okay, 1763 to 1766, Catechism of the Catholic Church. O di, naturo nyo pa sa kanila, no? Tuto pa silang magbasa. At the same time, you can now explain to them, it's a bodily chemical reaction. Okay, as what psychology tells us. So we don't just give them examples na, oh, it's actually love, it's actually sadness. No, so those are examples, my dear teachers. But we have to tell them the definition of in psychology, philosophy, and even the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Now, if you tell me, I don't have to explain all of those three. Yes, you don't have to. That's why I'm giving you these choices so that you can choose whether you want to explain it to them in a philosophical manner or in a psychological manner or from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. But since we are teachers of religion, then we can explain it from the point of view of the CCC. Okay, the only time maybe you can elaborate is when your students ask you to elaborate on it. And then maybe that's the time you can use the examples from philosophy and psychology. The church recognizes the scientific fact that emotions are physiological movements of the sensitive appetite. Look at the term that the CCC made good use of. Physiological bodily movements, sensitive appetite, which is what we used, a term that we used in philosophy. They involve our sensory motor systems, hormones, and neurotransmitters. So I guess teachers, we realize now, okay, now I know what emotions are. Then I can now proceed to the next aspect. Okay, so the catechism makes it clear that it's not what we feel, but what we choose to do with our feelings that matters. I would like us to focus on this, my dear teachers. Okay, it is not what we feel. So emotion is, of course, they are feelings. But then when we tap on the students' emotions, we are not going to tap on how the students feel, but how they choose to do with their feelings that matters, which we will elaborate later on. So that is our way of tapping their emotions. Okay, so we tap their emotions, but then what do you do? What do you choose to do with what you're feeling now? Yun, my dear teachers. We hit the nail on the head. Yun ang kailangan natin gawin. Okay? Because in themselves, passions are neither good nor bad or evil, which is what we also stated kanina. We already clarified that. They are morally qualified only to the extent that they effectively engage reason and will. Again, we talked about this kanina. Okay? Hindi pwedeng emotions lang. We have to connect it with our reason. Reason has to govern emotions and not the other way around. Passions are said to be voluntary, either because they are commanded by the will or because the will does not place obstacles in their way. Again, the will, reason, it is the one that dictates, not emotions dictate us. It belongs to the perfection of the moral or human good that the passions be governed by reason. Paulit-ulit man nating sabihin, mahirap gawin. Di ba? Have you ever taught in a class na the emotions run high and hindi nila makontrol? Maybe because they are teenagers, true, but maybe because we haven't learned to tap their emotions and let them choose what to do with their feelings, with those emotions. That is why teachers let us focus on that yellow statement in yellow so that we will always remind ourselves that when we focus on tapping the emotions of the students, we let them choose on what to do with their feelings. That matters. Kaya di ba pag nag-away, minsan ang ginagawa ng mga teachers, sige, gusto niyo mag-away? Sige, away kayo, magsuntukan kayo. Etong kutsilyo, magsaksakan kayo, which is bad, di ba? Instead of doing that, why won't we process and let them choose? What do you intend to do with your feelings? Galit ka sa kanya. Gusto ko siyang suntukin, sir. Bakit gusto mo siyang suntukin? So we process. And then later on, make them realize na, is it okay? Is it good? Is it good to punch him? When you punch him, what is the result? So what happens later on? We process. So sana ganun tayo. Sabi ko nga mahirap gawin, pero kailangan we have to go out of our way to actually talk to them. Okay? Like a student of mine during the pandemic, he wanted to commit suicide. Kung sasabihin ko lang sa kanya, kasi pandemic, gawin mong gusto mong gawin. Cannot be. If you're a teacher, you have to find the time. Kahit na sabihin pa natin, oh Lord, ito na naman tayo. Oh God, ito na naman tayo. Bakit ako? Bakit ako? But then you were chosen as an instrument by God. Since you have been attending these seminars, then it's time for us to actually do something about it. And we help the student. I had to talk to the student, even if it was already like, 7 in the evening? I have to talk to him online. And I have to make him realize, and I have to ask him, okay, and process his feelings. And then later on, I had to convince him to talk to his parents. And sabi niya, sir, hindi ko kaya. And then I told him, kung hindi mo kaya, ako ang magsasabi. Pagka ganun usually yung sinasabi ng teacher, sinasabi ng bata, sir, ako na lang. Sa nahihiya sila yung teachers magsabi. Okay? But we have to let them choose to do with their feelings. Okay? And the reason why, anyway, I didn't mention the name of the boy. The reason why he wanted to commit suicide, kasi he's confused. Online, tapos wala siyang socialization. And then he was telling me na, sir, sabi niya, sir, I am bisexual. Sabi niya. So confused, hirap siya. Paano kung hindi natin siya kausapin? Anong mangyayari? Now, we get to know what the CCC tells us. Let's now proceed to this, no? I don't know if you've heard of this, but this is what I have actually learned before, no? Sinasabi sa akin ng mga matatanda, emotions are irrational. Emotions are childish. Uy, tino ka nga. Napaka-childish mo. Emotions are a sign of weakness. Mahina ka kasi umiiyak ka. Hiniwalayan ka ng girlfriend mo, umiyak ka, mahina ka, you're weak. Emotions can interfere with getting what you really want. Okay, kasi napaka-emotional mo, kaya hindi ka umaasenso. Emotions are not always reliable. Hindi na totoo ito, my dear teachers. Okay? Especially with the development, or not the development, but the discovery of mental health, no? Of the mental health issues that we encounter. Hindi na totoo to. Okay? Sometimes we get to see our students emotional. It's not because they are irrational or childish. It's because there is something that's bothering them. And that is what we need to discover. And that is what we need to tap. Emotions are important because they give texture to experience, even though at times we feel as though our emotions confound us or get in the way. Okay? Napaka-importante ng emotions. It's just telling us. Kasi they give texture to experience. Parang ano yan cake na pagka walang icing, bland. Pag nilagyan mo ng icing, nagkakaroon ng mas matamis na lasa. Nag-a-add siya to what you already are experiencing. That's why it adds up to the texture. That's why we need to show emotions. Mahirap din yung mga bata na hindi nagpapakita ng emotion kasi hindi natin alam kung anong iniisip nila. That's why let's remind ourselves of this. Emotions can get in the way or get you on the way. And of course, let us try to go into the second part of the statement, which is get you on the way so that we can move. We don't have to be stagnant. And let's continue helping each other on this. Okay. I came up with these several questions which we can actually answer right now. Okay. How emotions relate to the life of faith. Okay, so bago tayo mag-proceed na sa tapping of the emotions on the part of the students, we learned something about the emotions, what emotions are. Let's see now how emotions relate to faith, to the life of faith. Let's ask the first question, that does faith actually make any difference when it comes to the world of emotions? The answer, of course, is, oh no, no, it doesn't make any difference. No? So even if we encounter certain emotions, okay, our faith remains. Now, if there are doubts, that is when people can start helping this person so that the doubts will be removed. Again, I'll go back to the statement that we had kanina. What is important is not the manifestation of the emotions, but what we can do with what we choose to do with that emotion. So, very important for us to realize that and actually use it in the first question. Second question, the Bible speaks out the transformation of our minds. What about the transformation of our feelings? Meron ba? Yeah, there is. There are instances in the Bible na nagkakaroon ng transformation of feelings. Naalala niyo yung time ni Martha, okay, and Mary? Di ba sabi ni Martha kay Jesus, Jesus, please tell Mary, nako, focus on the more important things. Tulungan niya ako dito. Okay? But what did Jesus tell Martha? Focus on the more important things, Martha. Okay? So, makinig ka sa Word of God. So, nagkaroon ng transformation. So, pwede bang mangyari ng transformation of feelings? Yes, pwede po. Okay? So, lagi natin tatandaan yan. Now, why am I saying these things? Because once we tap on the emotions of our students, natatakot ba tayo na baka yung mga estudyante natin hindi ma-transform in their feelings? Natatakot ba tayo na magkakaroon ng pagkakaiba, magkakaroon ng doubts? Okay? So we're answering the questions now. Should we as Christians experience emotions differently than those outside of the faith? The answer is no. There's no difference. Kung ano ang fear, that's fear. Kung ano ang sadness, happiness, that's the same. In fact, our main goal, our main purpose is, remember, the eternal happiness with God in heaven. And all of us experience that. And all of us actually should be going to that, even if we are experiencing emotions. Okay? But our emotions are not different from those outside of the faith. Now, how does the Bible relate to guilt, anger, sadness, and fear? Does it show in the Bible? Oh yes. Di ba? Guilt pa lang. Remember? Cain and Abel. Di ba? May guilt. Anger, of course, merong, I don't know if you're familiar with the battle, no? Was it Isaiah in against the god called Baal? Okay, anger from God, no? So, meron siyang pinadalang mga fire, okay? Okay, nandun. Sadness, of course. Okay? And fear. Pero ang laging sinasabi natin, be not afraid. And that is what I'm going to tell all of us teachers here in this meet. Let us not be afraid to tap the emotions of our students to teach religion. And should Christians feel less of these emotions and more positive ones like happiness, joy, tranquility, and hope? Not necessarily. Okay? Hindi lang tayo puro positive. Although St. Paul tells us, di ba, that we all should always experience joy. But St. Paul didn't mean na palaging joy. We have to go through sufferings, challenges. But what St. Paul actually stresses that after all these, we will experience the positive emotions, happiness, joy, tranquility, and hope. So we are able to answer all of these questions, my dear teachers. And if all of you agree with me this time, then we are all now ready to tap the emotions of our students and be able to teach religion by using those emotions and let them choose what to do with those emotions. That is why when it comes to the emotional life, the Bible does not offer commandments, no? That's why let's look into the yellow statements first, no? So pabaligtad tayo. So first, the Bible recognizes that human experience can be quite diverse. Okay? Please take note of that. So it's a reality that the Bible actually tells us that the human experience can be quite diverse. There is not one emotion that we actually manifest in certain events. That's why when it comes to the emotional life, the Bible does not offer commandments. Hindi sinasabi ng Bible na, oy, dapat maging masaya ka dito sa ganitong situation. Eh what if I don't feel anything, no? So iba yung feeling ko, no? Hindi siya total happiness, hindi siya total joy. No one will stop you from doing that. Okay, that is what the Bible is telling us. Diverse ang ating emotions. There is not one emotion that will actually dictate us that we have to manifest. Sabay-sabay nating i-manifest. This is the reason why ang sarap magturo ng religion. Kasi once we teach something like a story, like a parable, when we tap on the emotions of the students, di ba? Hindi natin malalaman kung ano talaga yung kanilang emotions. Unless, of course, if you are a grade school teacher and you already identified the emotions for them. Kasi nga naman, pag grade school teacher ka, mahirap na sila mismo mag-identify, okay, ng emotions to a specific story. Okay, number one, let's keep this in mind. Diverse ang reaction. Second, look at the yellow statement again, my dear teachers. The Bible makes clear that we are broken people living in a fallen world. So therefore, again, the emotional reactions will not be the same. Okay, will not be perfect also. There will be reactions that will be triggered by an instant reaction that is needed to a situation. I'll give you an example. Remember the story of Joseph, okay, and his brothers and Potiphar and his wife, the wife of Potiphar. Remember? The wife of Potiphar accused Joseph of seducing her. What's the normal reaction? Immediate, not normal, but immediate reaction of Potiphar. Magagalit ako, di ba? Ako yung husband, isi-seduce mo yung wife ko. So, pinakulong niya si Joseph. But is there anything wrong? Immediate reaction niya yun eh. Yes, but there is a realization later on. This is the beauty in teaching religion again in high school. Kasi you need to have an immediate reaction from the students. But later on, meron tayong realization. na kailangang i-process natin. That is why the difference between me telling the students from Paref ghost stories from us tapping the emotions of our students to teach in teaching religion is that I don't have to process my ghost stories to them. Tayo, we need to process it. Yun ang importante. And uh, another immediate reaction that I can think of is the road rage. Di ba? Nabangga ka, nagalit ka, but we have no control of the situation. Di ba? And then bigla ka na lang nagalit. But that's an immediate reaction. And then later on, you get to realize mali pala ako. And we have seen that often. You know, when, pardon me in saying this, no, when you watch Tulfo, di ba? Laging merong, yes sir, nagkamali ako. But that's an immediate reaction. But there is a realization. And that's a very important aspect when we teach religion. And number third, the Bible envisions that the faith can have a significant impact on our emotional lives. Take note, the faith can have a significant impact in our emotional lives. As just stated, the correlation between our faith and our emotional life will not always be perfect because we are not perfect. Pero kailangan mapakita natin sa mga students yung impact, okay, of emotions in our faith. And so therefore, teachers, if you are now ready, let us go into some examples that I can share with you in tapping the emotions of our students in teaching religion. As our model of how to live good Christian lives on earth, Jesus was no emotionless robot. Jesus made use of human emotions to teach, in fact. That is why, let me cite these examples before I go into actual examples. Diba, he expressed sorrow and cried with Martha and Mary when they told him his friend Lazarus had died. There was an emotion, which is a normal emotion, of a human person realizing that his friend has died. We can see that in Jesus Christ himself. He expressed justified anger or righteous anger by turning over tables when people were taking advantage of the poor and desecrating his father's house. When people were selling items in the church, that's why he got mad, and it's a righteous anger. He also manifested anger. When God came down to earth in human form, he took on everything that it means to be human, emotions and all. So Jesus, as a human person, experienced all of the emotions, and he made good use of that to teach us. Okay, admiration, adoration, aesthetic appreciation, amusement, etc. All of these, there are more, no, that he himself experienced, and he taught us in the form of parables. My dear teachers, if we are all ready, let me begin by assisting you, suggesting to you how we can teach these lessons by tapping the emotions of our students and making sure, again, that when we get to tap their emotions, we have to make sure that they choose on how to do about it. Okay? So we begin with the prodigal son. We all know the story of the prodigal son, but by the way, let me share something with you. When I was a young kid, no, when I was in the grade school, I thought the prodigal, no, at that time kasi hindi naman talaga kami tinuturuan na magtanong ano ibig sabihin ng prodigal son, no? And unless until this time, no, the students so easy access, no, Google mo lang, search mo lang, kay nandyan na. But during that time, wala pa naman kaming ganon. So I thought prodigal actually means a sinner, no, the sinner's son, no? And then later on, years later, I realized prodigal actually means extravagant, no? And we have, you know, grade 1 students have learned this story. I learned this story when I was in grade school. And the focus has always been the same. You know, the father is God, you know, the son is a sinner. There's confession. Okay, so we talk about confession. And then later on, years later, we realize, okay, ano bang role ng brother? Okay, so nainggit siya. So in real life, di ba meron din ganun? And then the father says, bakit tayo magse-celebrate? Palagi ka naman nandito. Every day, we actually celebrate you. Yung kapatid mo was lost and was found. Okay, so we get to see that other angle of the story. Pero just in case lang, my dear teachers, we have not tapped on the emotions of our students and let them identify what are the emotions that you might manifest, okay, by looking into a specific portion of the story. Para maiba naman, di ba? Like for example, when the prodigal son, di ba, when he became bankrupt and he had to eat swine food and hunger, and he was always hungry, he was in pain. Oh, what was the emotion that he manifested? And what do you intend to do about it? Ang dami, di ba? May hatred of evil, the craving for the Father's house. Okay, now kung nakikita nyo, nahihirapan yung mga anak nyo, yung mga estudyante nyo, whom we consider as our sons or daughters, no? So if they are having a difficult time, you can already make them identify, or you can actually identify them for them, no? Identify the emotions for them. Okay, for example, craving. Okay, where in the story can we actually see the emotions of craving? Okay, where in the story? Yan. So mas madali sa kanila. So we don't have to make it difficult for them. We can have this technique or suggestion, but we could also do other ways. Okay, you can actually show first the situation and let them identify the emotion. Okay, if you were the prodigal son, okay, would you have done the same thing? Maybe some of them would say, sir, I'll be very embarrassed, just like the prodigal son, not to go back to my dad. Why? What is that feeling of embarrassment? What will you do about it? Again, please keep in mind, what will you do about that emotion? Okay. And then there is that feeling of confusion on the part of the brother. Confused ako. Bakit ganon? Nandito ako, I'm here, dad. But you never celebrated me. Okay, so there is that confusion. And again, no, you can in fact ask them, was there ever a time? No? So from the moment you actually talk about the situation in the story, you can now proceed to their own life story. Okay, I'll give you an example in a while on that, because I read an article on that one. What about the Good Samaritan? No, hatred for selfishness. Okay, giving, generosity, charity. Okay, we know that. But is there any other way in which we can teach the Good Samaritan? Story of the Good Samaritan. By the way, when we speak of the Good Samaritan, of course, we know that they are the non-Jews. Okay, kung sino pa yung non-Jewish person, siya pa yung tumulong. That's why it's always equated, Good Samaritan, the term Good Samaritan is always equated to someone who helps. Okay? Now, we can actually teach our students by telling them the concept of being a neighbor. Because remember, we can actually go into the commandments of God, okay, especially the two greatest commandments of God, no? Love God above all things and love your neighbor as you love yourself, okay, or love one another as you love me, okay? Of course, it's the Old and the New Testament version. And that alone can help us and help you suggest to your students, what is your concept of a neighbor? So is a neighbor just the next door neighbor? Is he just the person that when you go outside, you see him? Siya ba yung nagtitinda doon sa kanto? Okay? But before, of course, that is our concept. But then we make our students realize that, you know, our neighbor is not just the person who is close to us, who lives near us, but it could be a stranger, someone who needs our help, and we help them out. Could be in the form of your classmates, could be someone outside of the school, could be someone whom you don't even know, okay, that you can help out. That is the concept. Or if you really want an activity within the classroom, then you can talk to your class and tell them the concept of charity for everyone. Because all of us have stories wherein a batch or a class wherein they are not united. There's no batch that's considered perfect. They may look united outside, but inside they're not. And you can make good use of that to make them united and work into those students who are bullied or being laughed at. You know, I had a class na they were not my advisory actually, but I taught them in personal development when we were still face to face. And I noticed that pagka meron akong sinasabi no, on relationships, stuff like that, lagi nilang tinatawag, sir si ano, sir si ganyan, sir, same person. And then I had to stop my class and I had to make it a teachable moment. Okay? Don't be afraid. Again, fear not to stop your class and come up with a teachable moment and tell your class that class, you know, mind you, you don't know what you've got until the person is gone, because your batch is not complete without this person, and you might lose this person. Okay, someday when you have a get together and you want to unite as a batch, have a reunion, and wala siya, hindi kompleto. And that's when they realize that, oh nga, no, hindi nga pala tayo complete without this person. So there are different aspects that we could actually utilize by tapping their emotions. You can make good use of that and tell them that if you're not united, why are you not united as a batch? Because you are supposed to be the good Samaritan. Okay, kahit hindi kayo magkabarkada, but you are classmates, your batchmates. So again, no, you can make good use of your religion class to make the class united. What about the next one? Oh, this is the parable of the lost coin. You know, Jesus Christ actually taught this parable in front of the Pharisees. Kasi sabi ng mga Pharisees, why are you always with the sinners? Why are you always sharing table with the sinners? No, they are sinners. You should be sharing tables with us. Kasi kami yung mga righteous people. We know the law and we practice the law. Pharisees. What did Christ say? No. You know, we are supposed to be after the lost. Okay? And that's why he told them the parable of the lost coin. So this woman, you know, lost one coin, which is very important. In fact, I read an article which says that that coin that she lost could be equivalent to 1 day's work. Kaya talagang hinanap niya, ganun ka-importante yung coin na yun. And when she found that, she celebrated. She went out of the house and told all her neighbors to celebrate. I found the coin that was lost. Be like Pope Francis, okay, who is like that woman searching for that lost coin. Okay, we are afraid of losing something valuable. And this is where I read that article of this woman who said na he felt like she was a lost coin when her parents died. Kasi she felt na parang wala na, no? She lost hope and so forth. Pero she felt that her neighbors, her classmates, her friends were actually the woman who was looking for the coin, because they would go to her house, comfort her, okay, gave her peace of mind. And she realized that, no, I am like the lost coin, but I was found. So when you give this lesson to your students, you can actually make them think, no? Do you know of someone who is lost? It could be physically, okay, mentally, spiritually, which I will connect later on with another lesson. Okay, you can choose which one you want to actually use, either this one or the parable of the lost sheep. Okay, so we help each other. So, or you can tell them, which would you prefer? You be the coin, or which are you? Not you prefer, but which are you? Are you the coin or are you the woman? Are you the one who is lost? And you have to be honest. And then maybe you can ask them to write. And then you read the reflection. And then you'll find out. And when you get to find out who is lost, that's when you get to tap the emotion so that you can use the emotion and let her choose what to do about it. Di ba ang ganda? Kaya ang sarap magturo ng religion class, because there are stories like this and we can now look into the different aspects, not just the moral of the story. Because I know for a fact, because I taught religion as what I said, lagi nating sinasabi, oh, what is the moral of the story? What is the moral of the story? But now let's tap in the emotions. Okay, maybe at the end of the class, you can ask them, okay, students, how did you feel about the story? Sir, I was happy. Sir, I was sad. Oh, why were you happy? Why were you sad? So again, we tap into the emotions of the students. And what about the parable of the lost sheep? Okay, are you the shepherd? Are you the sheep? I can liken this story to a pastor, no? To a pastor who is maybe well loved kasi ang tagal na niya naging pastor. Tapos bigla may bagong dumating. Okay? Or may umalis. Hindi na uma-attend pala, sorry. Umalis, hindi na uma-attend. Tapos that pastor would search for him. And then the 99 attendees in the church might complain, said, Pastor, paano hahanapin yung nag-iisa? Eh, nandito naman kami. Huh? Eh, kasi hindi nyo ako kailangan. Kasi nandito pa kayo. Siya kailangan ako because baka may problema siya. Kaya ko siya hinahanap. Okay? So, again, no? Let's try our best to find, tap on the emotions of our students. Is there anyone whom he considers himself as a lost sheep or she considers herself as a lost sheep? Okay? Let me tell you a story of very fast lang. So we have 15 minutes left. How time flies so fast. Time flies so fast. Okay. I'm reminded of a retreat that I attended with the students. I was one of the facilitators. And then on the last day, when they are allowed to make noise na, it's our fourth year high school students years ago, I noticed that they were laughing. You know, all of them were gathered in one classroom, one room. This was held in Baguio. Then they were laughing, passing the cell phone to one another, from one person to another. And then I came and then I said, what's happening? And then they said, sir, there's a girl calling us. Eh, you know naman how boys are. And then sabi ko, katatapos yun lang mag-retreat. Ano ito? It turns out the girl was actually trying to say some sexual innuendos over the phone. Na syempre, if you're a boy and, you know, all boys school, na-excite sila. And katatapos lang nila mag-retreat. Then I said, let me answer the call. And then I answered the call and then she started saying like, oh, would you like to do this? Would you like to do that? I said, I'm so sorry, but this is Mr. Regencia. I'm the teacher of the boys that you were calling. Tahimik siya. And then I said, you know what? Instead of, you know, the boys just came from a retreat. And then I said, maybe you can join us in praying the Hail Mary to avoid, you know, these impure thoughts that you have. Again, teachable moment. Hindi pwedeng ginawa ng mga bata tapos hayaan ko na lang sila after the retreat. Again, the emotions of the boys. Tap on the emotions. And then she dropped the phone. And then the boys said, sir, tatawag yan ulit. The boys already knew. Then she calls again. I answered the phone again. And she started crying. And she said, sir, can you blame me for being like this? I'm alone in the house. My parents aren't here. And so what can I do? I'm so, you know, tempted to do these things, etc. I'm lonely. She's lost. She's lost. And you know, if she's lost and you don't do anything about it, then you can be guilty of not helping out. Okay? So I tried to help out. And I said, you know what? I'll teach you how to pray. Talk to your parents. Talk to your class advisor. Talk to your teacher. These are the people who can help you. Talk to your religion teacher. I even said that to her. And this is when, you know, the real, actual class and practice we can actually do to the lost sheep. Kaya marami yan, my dear teachers, marami yan. Hindi lang natin alam, but when we get to teach them, makikita natin yan. Lalabas at lalabas yung mga yan. Because wala lang sigurong tumutulong sa kanila. Wala lang nagtuturo sa kanila. Wala lang nagbe-bring out ng emotion sa kanila. And that is where we enter into the picture and teach, tap the emotions and let them choose the how to do about it, what to do about it. Okay? And the parable of the lost sheep again. no? Christ rebuked the Pharisees in this situation. Kasi sabi niya, kayo yung dapat maging shepherd. Pero bakit nakafocus kayo sa sarili nyo? Di ba? Which is true. Now, magkaaway ba si Christ and Pharisees? No. No. Christ just want them to realize. Okay? Like for example, the rich man and Lazarus. Actually, ma-realize din natin na sometimes we are the Pharisees, di ba? When we tell ourselves na, guys, students, magaling ako, di ba? Ang galing-galing ko. Ang daming mga bagsak sa klase ko. Hindi nyo kasi kaya. Kasi magaling ako. Wow, I have had co-teachers before who were like that. And mind you, when I was a new teacher, I thought I was good because students fail in my class. Without realizing na I am like the Pharisee na feeling ang galing-galing because I practice the law. I teach what I know. So therefore, I'm magaling without realizing that, hey, you have to be the shepherd. And this story, the rich man and Lazarus, okay, makes us realize that the Pharisees don't have this, which is the term desensitization, which is compassionless. Or they are like this pala. They don't have compassion. They don't have sympathy. They're callous. Okay? This is what happened to the rich man. Diba? Wala siyang compassion over Lazarus. And what happened? At the end, of course, we see that Lazarus was in heaven while the rich man was in hell. And then he said, what are you doing there, Lazarus? No? Why are you there? No? Parang resting easy. And then God said, well, he's in heaven and you're in hell. And he said, may I, and then the rich man says, told God, may I go back to earth and warn my brothers? Okay? And God said, well, kung hindi nga kayo nakikinig sa mga prophets, more so, will your brothers listen to you and go back as a ghost? Matatakot lang sa yung mga brothers niyo. So again, very important lesson. Are we callous? Are we compassionless? Then maybe you can actually inject in your lesson an outreach program that you can give them. You see, promote ko na naman, no? The Para Future Leader Summit. We had an outreach somewhere in Sukat. And it's actually my first time to ride the trolley. Even the boys, first time ride the trolley sa may riles ng tren. And okay pala, no? Okay pala. Para kang nasa tren din, kaya lang trolley siya. No? And then when we got to the area, the students were exposed. No? Hindi sila sanay pero na-expose sila. But then, they are, let's face it, they belong to the upper bracket of society, these students. And when they were there, they were not like the rich man. So you are now exposing them, again, no? Exposure to an actual project, which is not just in theory, because you actually look for a place where you can do an outreach. Okay? And let them be exposed to these people and realize that, okay, this is like the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. Okay? So we are there. So if you're the rich man, help out. Okay? And do your part. So this is a realization on the part of the boys. And those are my suggestions, my dear teachers. Madami pa, ang dami pang kwento na pwede mong piliin or part of the curriculum in religion, the stories, the parables. So hindi lang tayo puro catechism points. And make good use of these parables, tap into the emotions. And in fact, it's important again for them to see that even you as a teacher, okay, will have an emotion. Okay, maybe some of them will ask you, what about you, ma'am? Sir, sino kayo sa kwento? Sir, are you the shepherd? Ma'am, are you the shepherd or are you the lost sheep? Or are you part of the 99 sheep who are already there? Okay? And it's not lost, but you are there already. So, napakaganda because you are now sharing your own experiences and they will learn from us. And you become the example of the students. And for all we know, a lost sheep will be found because of the example that you're giving. Kaya, my dear teachers, ang sarap magturo ng religion because of this. And don't allow your emotions again to overpower your intelligence. This is the reason why, okay, Man's design is this, di ba? Pardon for using the term man, because the figure that I'm showing you is actually the figure of the Vitruvian man, which Leonardo da Vinci actually sketched. And according to Leonardo da Vinci, you are a perfect person if your body is symmetrical, no? Pati yung mukha mo. So kahit daw yung itsura mo hindi maganda sa ibang tao, pero you have the perfect, no? From top to up to the chin, from ear to ear, perfection, symmetrical. You are a perfect person. But then why is the design? Why are we designed like this by God? Okay, we're upright. But look, the head is above the heart. The heart is above the stomach, and the stomach is above the reproductive organs. It just shows to us the reality na hindi puro puso. Kailangang isip-isip din. Kaya kung meron tayong mga kaibigan, di ba, or even estudyante, Sir, love ko na siya. Huh? Hey, wag puro puso ang pairalin. Even use your mind as well.